Hi, everybody. I'm Sue Hilliard, and I'm here with Robin Grabfelder. And today we are going to hear Deanna Salqan do a presentation about the Saturn, Neptune, Uranus interaction and what's going on in the world. Welcome, Deanna.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you having me and allowing me to present this for whoever is interested to listen. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, and I always like to explore the history along with the astrology, and this is one way how I continue like looking and how the astrology also helps me to understand what's going on as well in this part of the world. In this presentation, I did one similar to it before, but in this presentation, I also looked at main historical events, but the recent history of the events from again, like from somebody who has lived in this area. And I think its perspective is not very much presented out there in the world, the Palestinian perspective, like how I see it, what happened, why peace seems so difficult, why the peace process failed, what happened. And all I do is, I mean, in this presentation in particular, I knew the dates that were turning points in history because I lived through them. So one thing I do in this presentation is I also offer a personal input to some of the charts and the events because I know that these events mattered because they were turning points. And I drew up the charts to these dates and trying to see, so astrologically, from an astrological perspective, I'm hoping that putting the history, the date, and putting the chart next to each other helps us understand a little bit the astrology, the archetype, to make it a little bit more alive. But also, I'm hoping that the archetypes also explain a little bit more. So I'm hoping that this exploration I'm hoping it's successful, that it's valuable, and people find value both as historical information, but also from an astrological perspective, really. So, yeah. Shall we jump in?
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay. So I chose the year 1988 because this is a very important year astrologically speaking. This is where we're having the almost like the triple conjunction of Uranus and Saturn, Neptune at the final degrees of Sagittarius. And this is not only an important year astrologically, this is also a very important year in the Palestinian history. This is when the First Intifada began. So I'm going to speak a little bit about the First Intifada because when I speak about it, I think the archetype will just come alive for us. So I'll speak a little bit about it, and then we'll look at the charts together. So it began on just a little bit before the conjunction. So in December 87, an incident happened in Gaza, Jabalia refugee camp, and the incident ignited mass demonstrations all over Gaza, all over the West Bank, every city, every village, every refugee camp. There was an organic and a very natural reaction to this incident where like there was massive protests everywhere, and that continued for many days. Like it never stopped. Every day we had this massive number of people protesting. Um, and um, what I mean, back then I was a young teenager back then, and everybody was taken by surprise by this. Like nobody expected this. Not us, the Palestinian people. We didn't expect these mass protest movement expressed by this Uranus, right? Like Uranus sometimes is about mass protests. Not even the Israeli military expected these protests, but also not the Palestinian leadership. The Palestinian leadership back then was outside the West Bank. It was in Tunisia. I don't know if you know Tunisia. It's a North African country, but also an Arab country. So, so everybody was taken by surprise. Like how did this, like, why are they protesting? What's happening? What's going on? And people were protesting the military rule because what occupation is, it looks like having military in the streets. So when I was there, it looked like this. When I was a young teenager, it looked like somebody who was not allowed to study Palestinian history in school. So I was one of those, all of us. It wasn't allowed. The name Palestine was not allowed to be in our textbooks. We were not allowed to study about Palestinian geography. What I studied in school is Jordanian geography. Jordan is a different country, which is like next door. So there was a lot of cultural identity suppression, and that's where the Sagittarius comes in. Saturn in Sagittarius, there was an identity suppression by this military rule. The Israeli military was managing our day-to-day lives, our education system, our health system, even the judicial system. So we really did not exist as people. All we had is just soldiers managing our lives. Even the textbooks had they were stamped, they needed to be stamped by the military officer, for example, because there has to be, like, there must not be a word about Palestine. And so as a young girl growing up, I really did not know anything, right? I was like really young teenager. And so this intifada was about protesting that level of suppression, the suppression of a national identity. So the Saturn, there's the suppression element, and the Uranus is the people trying to push back against that suppression and to express themselves as they see themselves, authentically, that Uranus Saturn conjunction in Sag. The First Intifada was also a civil disobedience movement. It was one of the things that we did, for example, was refusing to pay taxes. And many of the things that I tell you are, I mean, if you don't pay taxes, you were imprisoned. If you were a teacher and you mentioned the word Palestine, you would be arrested or laid off from your job. So really, they really they tried to suppress our identity as much as possible. And that went on for as long as people can remember. Also, people, for example, I'm just going to say examples of how that looked like. People also burned their identity cards, for example, which was an Israeli identity card. This was also a cultural movement. I mean, one of the objectives of this first intifada, which was extremely nonviolent, and as I said, just an organic and natural way of protesting the suppression of our national identity, also political identity. So we're trying like Gandhi style civil disobedience, but also one of the objectives is to re-educate the younger generation, like I was, re-educate them of their natural heritage and culture. So on a daily basis, we had activities, and like the Intifada did what the school system was not allowed to do, to re-educate us in both the history and the culture. So one of the things, for example, here's just one example of what that looked like back then, is we dress up with natural dress, the traditional dress you see in the picture over here, young girls just wearing them. I remember there was one day when dedicated to cultural heritage, we wear those dresses and we march in these dresses. Also the men, they would wear the traditional dresses, because we weren't allowed to express our identity. So sometimes the Saturn Uranus archetypes are about suppression, and then the Uranian element is a pushback, and that pushback looks like an overcompensation to express an identity because it was suppression. Whenever you have suppression, you have sometimes you try to overcompensate and articulate your identity more and more, right? So one of the things we did as well, for example, on the day of that cultural day, is not just wear them and be proud of them and march in them, but also arrange fashion shows in the school explaining the heritage, because this is a very rich heritage. For example, the color of the dress correlates with where you come from, geographically speaking, which city. Like this, the color purple is usually indicative of somebody who comes from Bethlehem, for example. But also, it's also indicative of the cultural status. If you have embroidery all over your dress, the more embroidery, the richer you are. It means you belong to a richer class, a social class. The patterns in front, on the chest part of the dress, the pattern and the stitches also refer to the geographical area where you come from, which city, which village. So the Intifada used to organize activities where the students in school, also in neighborhoods, would go to these villages, talk to the elderly, and write this information down because it's a lost, right? We were afraid to lose that identity. And they would organize a fashion show in school, and that would happen without the school principal knowing, because the school principal, if they allowed the students to do that, they might be arrested or laid off from their job. So it was that kind of Sagittarius, like it was very much a very cultural movement, not just a so it's not the first Intifada was really not very violent as opposed to the second Intifada. We will look at that as well. I just want to mention, like, also there was a huge surge in the folkloric music, dance, and singing. Some of the songs recited the names of the villages that I did not study in the textbooks, and they introduced the names of the villages for me through these songs. They introduced the names of the villages that were emptied during the Nakba, right? And some of them are still empty. And they also, some of the songs were about the history pre-1984, pre-Israel, the history of the resistance during against the British colonial rule. There was a huge revolt, a very famous revolt in the 30s against the British rule. So there was a song about that revolution, about the leaders, the names of the leaders, and how they were arrested and hanged. And so this is what it looked like, the um, the first Intifada. The last thing I want to say about this Intifada, which was, I think it's a very formative years generally in the Palestinian history, is that yes, the objective was to re-educate the younger generation of their cultural heritage. So the conjunction was taking place in Sag, but it was also had the objective of raising the awareness outside to the international community that there is a people on this land that are asking for also their political rights. Like, we needed to exist as a political entity on this piece of land that we consider, our ancestors belonged to. So that's what it looked like. A very, I don't know what to call it, a very critical development as well happened also, around like a week into the First Intifada is the establishment of Hamas, it's very important to remember that Hamas is part of a larger movement, Islamic movement called the Muslim Brotherhood, it's a massive movement. Massive, it means that it's really widespread, not just in Palestine or in this area. It's in Jordan, it's in Egypt, it's in Turkey, it's across the Muslim and Arab world, all the North African countries. This is a massive movement, and Hamas is an offshoot of that. So that's a perspective I think that very few are aware of. And the way I see this establishment of Hamas in the chart is how when we have Saturn as an archetype of pressure, and here we have the pressure of military rule, of a structure, military structure or organization, pressuring a collective and refusing to allow them to express an identity authentically or just simply express ourselves, sometimes that pressure is also causes division or fracturing. So this, I understand the establishment of Hamas as an instance where there's fragmentation in the identity as well. So as we're trying to express it under pressure, Hamas comes into the scene and there's a fracturing, a fragmentation of identity. Because, and I will speak more to the chart as well, to the moon and the nodes and the Pluto and the Mars, but I want to emphasize this is such an important, I think, idea. So, because what happened is now we're having a split in how we define ourselves as Palestinians. Because we are the main difference between Hamas and the other leadership. Remember, I mentioned the leadership that was in Tunisia, which we call in the Arab world as national. You know, in the West, you have religious and secular. Like in the Arab world, it's more, we have Islamic and national sort of. The division is, that's the main division, national parties and then the Islamic Islam in a way. So that major division it still is and was about how we define ourselves as people. So it's a very Sagittarius kind of fracturing, meaning we did not agree about what kind of life, we still do not agree about what kind of lifestyle do we envision ourselves having in the future. How do we define ourselves? How important is religion? Because when you have a theology ruling you, like the Muslim Brotherhood, theologies in general infringe a lot on your personal freedoms. So that exists as well as part of that Hamas movement. Not the women, by the way. The women are very empowered in the Muslim Brotherhood, but I digress from that. I just want to emphasize that. I digress. But the idea is that there was a fracturing about how we are defining themselves. So even if we remove Israel out of the equation, let's say that the occupation did not exist, we, as Palestinians, we still did not agree, and we still do not agree on how we define ourselves in the future. How do we envision our future? Where do we want to be? And the second sort of fracturing was not just what are we talking about? What lifestyle do we want? But also how do we get there? Because now we have this reality that we are under this military rule. How do we get there? Do we fight or do we settle? So there's another fracturing that is added to the identity element of, of this Uranian fragmentation. This whenever there's pressure, the Capricorn pressure, it splinters off into millions of pieces. And I see this as like, I see Hamas coming into the scene as splintering off this identity, the Palestinian identity. So how do we deal with occupation? Do we make a peace deal? Do we settle under this pressure? Or do we fight? And if we fight, how do we fight? Do we fight non-violent resistance or armed resistance? And if armed resistance, what kind of armed resistance? Do we attack the soldiers or what I mean? It's like the identity has so many, it was fragmented. Like that's what I want to emphasize, which is the archetype of Uranus. Addressing the charts, the Pluto, Mars as well. It's indicative of a new birth, a new entity, but it's a combative entity, like with the Mars and the Pluto, right? In Scorpio. The nodes in Pisces, Virgo, and so many squares to this conjunction. The South Node Moon, for me, it's very expressive of the energy of the Muslim Brotherhood. The moon is the identity. How we define ourselves, the internal relationship to ourselves and how, our egos, our internal definitions to ourselves. And the Muslim, and being with the South Node, it's about it's exactly that for the Muslim Brotherhood, meaning that not only is this a movement that has come from Egypt from the 1930s. So many of the books and the theories and the textbooks that Hamas relies on comes from all the way back of 1935. And even back then, they were, I mean, even the textbooks in the 30s, they were relying on even the far distant past, which is the four imam, we say imam in Arabic, meaning the religious thinkers. There are four major imams that have shaped the religious understanding, that have shaped Islam. So it's a very much a South Node Moon conjunction. The whole chart is expressive of, I think, of what Hamas and the establishment of Hamas represents in the Palestinian history. Uh, Moving to the next year, 89, now we have the whole conjunction moving from Sagittarius, and now we're completely into the Capricorn realm with Saturn leaving Uranus and moving to speak to the Neptune, like this Neptune Saturn conversation. And like what that looked like for Palestinians at the First Intifada. The First Intifada just went on from 88, all 87, all the way to the signing of the Oslo Accords, which is in 93. But what that looked for us as a second year of that Intifada is that now the suppression was even more. The number of people arrested were so great, like so big, that the Israeli prisons had no space. So they needed to create prisons in the desert, in the Negev desert, and they built tents for, for these people, for these prisoners, because there was no space for them anymore. And of course, that affected the number of people who were protesting almost on a daily basis. So that's like the Capricorn elements. Or now we're moving into that more suppression, more pressure, more authority the authority trying to being very assertive. We're the strong people. We get to say here. And by the way, there are a lot of UN reports about that mass imprisonment situation. Like much of what I say is it's documented, and anybody who seeks the documentation, I can provide that. But in terms of the Neptune, the way I see the Neptune archetype in this year and how it changed the situation for us now that Saturn is with the Neptune is the same thing that we see today, meaning that there is an event that is larger than us, bigger than us, an overwhelming event that happens and it changes everything. It changes almost everything for everyone around the world, and it even affects our day-to-day lives. And internationally speaking, this is the year where 89 is the year where the Cold War ended, right? So symbolically speaking, this is the year where the Berlin Wall fell in November 89. So internationally speaking, what affected us was that the United States has become the sole authority in the whole of the world. Like the United States almost controlled all the institutions, the United Nations, the World Bank, like it controlled everything. So there was no opposition to that level of authority. So internationally speaking, that's what happened. And that impact eventually impacted us like everyone else. But also, or similarly, regionally, locally, or regionally, really, we had a similar kind of event, which happened on August 1999. Sorry, 1990, which was the invasion of Iraq into Kuwait. So the chart here, the 2nd of August, is the chart of that invasion. We have this Pluto squaring the nodes and Mars squaring the nodes, but it happened within the orb. We still have Neptune and Saturn within orb in that year still. What happened after this invasion is that the Palestinian leadership decided to take a neutral stance. So they did not condemn the occupation of one country into another, one Arab country to another Arab country. And what have we been doing for the past 2 years? We've been protesting the occupation. And so all of a sudden, we have this Neptune archetype for us as Palestinians where everything is rendered like useless. Like it's beyond our hands. Like we didn't expect this invasion. Nobody did. Um, and we were very disillusioned and disappointed in how the leadership dealt with this. And why did they take this position? And so we lost a lot of the international support. We lost a lot of the financial support because the leadership in Tunisia was being supported by the Gulf countries, and Kuwait was a very generous country. So now we had no financial support as well. And that is for me, it reflected a very Neptune-Saturn situation where this event comes along and it changes everything for us. Everything is void of meaning now. What have we been fighting for so far? And this is how it expressed itself, at least in my perspective. And it felt very hopeless at that time, right? Like, and very foggy, like what's going to happen to us? And we were holding our breath. What's going to happen? Like we have this regional conflict right now. What does the war look like? What's going to happen to us? Like it's a very much, it feels like what is happening right now, I think, where we don't know what's going to happen for not just us, but also I think many people are experiencing that. Now, going back, I know I'm going back into the year 89 because this is also a very unfortunate development as well that was happening in in that year on an exact Neptune and Saturn conjunction as well, July 1989, where the first suicide bombing happened. And this is the effect of the fragmentation. Do you remember when we spoke about how the Palestinian identity is now fragmented into so many different identities, communities where they want to express they want to express themselves. And this is what it looks like. Sometimes this is what it looks like in politics when you have communities wanting to assert their authority in the collective and wanted to oppose the existing consensus, right? Because one thing that I don't know if this is important or not, I'm just going to maybe mention it, is that Hamas was outside the consensus. The Palestinian leadership was the PLO, it's called the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. There was a yearly election. It was yearly elected, so it was quite representative of what the people voted for or what they represent. But Hamas refused to join the PLO. So they were outside of that consensus because I think they usually, most of the time, Ray, did not express enthusiasm to joining the PLO because they define themselves so differently. But this event back then, it would have been just one incident in that year. However, it happens on an exact conjunction, and honestly, it is a foreshadowing of what's to come. So some of the things or the incidents that happen during a conjunction, like a huge outer planet conjunction like this, where you don't know if it's significant, and it turns out later that it's very significant. So, like this incident foreshadows what to come. And obviously, clearly, this fragmentation that either Uranus and Saturn represent can be very damaging to societies. And I feel that it was very damaging to the Palestinian identity, the fragmentation of what happened, the Iranian archetype. And so now we are in international isolation. So we were compelled to join these peace talks. And it's interesting to see that now Saturn in the chart has just left the Capricorn field. It has entered, like it's like it has resigned from this Capricorn world in a way. And we only have Uranus and Neptune and that, yeah, North Node smack in the middle. But it's now we have the only sheriff in town, like the United States, uh, forcing or sort of driving most of the players in the region, most of the countries in the region into these talks, because the United States has formed an international coalition to liberate one country from an occupation. And there's the Palestinian people who have been fighting for 2 years for their liberation or for their identity and political representation. And well, this like sort of this issue needed to be dealt with from the perspective of that of the United States. And at this point, the Uranus Neptune conjunction looks a little bit more hopeful right now that Saturn is out of the way, because now we felt that, okay, so maybe everything that we were fighting for, there's a hope. Maybe the plight for freedom can be answered at this point, right? So Neptune, there's this hopefulness now with this development of us being dragged, like both sides were dragged into these peace talks, the Madrid conference. In this, what is particular in this Madrid peace conference is that they were regional. They were not just Palestinian, Israeli. There was Lebanon, Syria was there, the Gulf countries. They were trying, like the United States was trying to come out with a major or regional peace plan, which echoes a little bit what Trump is trying to do these days. I mean, Trump is trying to do that, which is an echo of that period as well. However, it seems a lot more forceful this time around, whereas it seemed or it looked very hopeful back then. Very interesting also, I think just information to add about this is that Israel considered the PLO as a terrorist organization, even though the PLO is it's the same organization that later signed the Oslo Accords, but it was considered terrorist. And this is why in the First Intifada, even if we carried the Palestinian flag, we would be arrested, right? Because it was called the flag of the organization. This is how the Israeli army and administration called it. So we were not allowed to carry our Palestinian flag even during the First Intifada and before that. So now this organization in the Madrid conference, Israel still considered the PLO as terrorist. And so they did not want to engage in talks with them. And so the talks were with people on the ground, from the people who were leaders in the First Intifada. So there was indirect negotiations, and there was people from the ground who were in this Madrid conference, along with a lot of regional players. And back then in 91, I was in, like I remember some of my teachers were part of this Madrid conference, and I remember them, they were as translators and as linguists in this peace process. The process was much more meticulous in the negotiations, and I wonder if it ever this negotiations, if have ever been successful, it probably would have been much more successful than the Oslo Accords. I think because it was a much more meticulous way. I remember my teachers there, and then when I was in the university, they were telling me about how behind the scenes the Madrid conference was taking place and how it was going and how the negotiations were going. But it's Neptune. From behind the scenes, we have negotiations directly with the PLO. So Israel, behind the scenes, so the Madrid conference was ongoing, and then behind the scenes, Neptune, the unseen, the hidden, uh, Israel was having direct negotiations with the PLO. The PLO, the main figure is Yasser Arafat that you see in the picture over here. And the chart, I mean, I find the chart really very, again, very expressive, reflective and expressive of the energies. I mean, look at the picture. We have the sole authority in town, the United States, Capricorn, sort of bringing these two sides together as, as we call them the brokers, the peace brokers, and they're bringing the Uranus, meaning the people that we want to express ourselves with the Israelis, and there's now we know it was an illusion of peace. It wasn't real peace, but now we know it. But back then it was a very hopeful spirit that was ongoing. Like we really felt hopeful and very happy to see that. And I highlighted in this chart, I highlight the square to Jupiter in Libra. The Libra archetype is a very diplomatic, where it hides tension. It tries to avoid the tension. And I think the tension is with the Jupiter, the belief system. And this is also a foreshadowing element. It holds a secret, this Jupiter, the belief systems in both societies, where it is where the tension existed and still exists, I think. And this is where the chart is expressing something that maybe now we can understand very well. And back then we would be questioning what the square is about. But it was very foreshadowing as well. This is just an image where I share how hopeful it was. We're very thrilled to have this peace deal, this signing. We have young students, these young boys offering olive branches which is for us a symbol of peace, to the soldiers. And the soldiers were leaving our cities. For me, this was the first time that I've ever experienced my city without soldiers. That was the first time I ever experienced that. Life without having soldiers, like having the military boots on our necks, like on top. So I thought just that I hope that this image sort of portrays the mood, the vibe. It was a very good vibe, and everybody was happy, really. Uh, as I said about the Jupiter square, and this slide is a manifestation of how the fragmentation of identity that I shared earlier manifests in the collective and the political sphere. Because now this new established Muslim Brotherhood movement or entity is trying to express itself in opposition to the consensus. Remember, the PLO expresses a consensus because it's an elected and a national movement, and Hamas was not part of that. And so we have a massive increase in the number of the suicide bombings. So the moment that the peace deal was signed, immediately after that, we have a huge increase in the number of these attacks. And what happened back then is, well, the disillusionment in the peace process began, especially for the Israeli society, because now peace was no longer meaningful. Like we've signed this deal and there's no safety and security, right? Like this fragmentation of identity can really divert the journey from the consensus, but it takes it in places where it's not really the place where everybody wants to go. And also what happened, so not only do we have disillusionment in the Israeli society, but also in the Palestinian society, we were trying to salvage the peace deal, not just us, but also in the Israeli society, the Labor Party was trying to salvage the peace process. So what the Palestinian Authority did, so now the PLO, the leadership is here and it's called Palestinian Authority. What the PA tried to do is arrest. They arrested all of the leaders, Hamas leaders. They arrested all of the even the sympathizers, the grassroots people of Hamas. So there was the division in our identity was deepened. There was anger underneath, simmering underneath this division of identity. They weren't there wasn't a lot of human rights violation, meaning there weren't torture. There wasn't torture. There wasn't like beatings or anything of these people, but they were they were arrested in massive numbers and kept like inside prisons, and some of them without charges. So that was a violation of human rights. And so now people are becoming angry with that. So I want to move a little bit into more the realm of the Israeli society to try and explain how this fracturing of the identity not only exists in the Palestinian society, but also it exists in the Israeli society as well, from my perspective and from how I observed this. And it's also, I think, the chart sometimes seeps these meanings to us, not always. I mean, I'm not trying to force meanings into anything, but I'm trying to sort of see how the both are reflecting each other. So we know what happened in the Palestinian society, the fragmentation there. In the Israeli society, this is an incident that reflects this division among the Israeli society, in the Israeli society. So here we have an incident where an Israeli settler uh, entering into a mosque, and we call it the Ibrahimi Mosque. I think the biblical name, I'm not sure if this is the biblical name or not, the Cave of the Patriarchs. So I don't know if this is the English name or the biblical name, but anyway, it's in the city of Hebron. A settler, an armed settler, enters and shoots as many as 20, 21 people who were praying. So they were kneeling down, doing their prayers, and he shoots as many as 20 people. Among them were children as well. And this happens on a Neptune-Uranus conjunction, and the chart is very telling, really. Look how many, look at the squares, the oppositions on that day, the North Node with Pluto. That's expressive of, unfortunately, where we're heading, because we're heading into a world where religious extremism is becoming more and more dominant. So the Pluto North Node here squaring the nodes is very expressive of what reality looked like and still looks like in a way. Uh, the um, the shooter of this incident was this settler. He's American born and he's from the United States. His name is Goldstein, Baruch Goldstein, and he belongs to the Kach movement. Now, this movement is a movement that is it holds a very extreme ideology that openly calls for the death of Arabs and the killing of Arabs, like openly. They celebrate that and they say that. However, in the Israeli society, this movement, and especially after this shooting incident, this movement was declared a terrorist movement, and it was banned from having any political activity or being represented in the Knesset. However, the reason why I included this incident is because of what we see right now, because we have the current national security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, he was hanging, he had a photo of him, a picture of him in his own home, and there's like footage of it on the YouTube of in his home with an interview with a journalist, and he was showing the journalist the photo of this settler. I think he removed it when he entered the government recently in 2022. But for me, it's really I find that perplexing. Like, how do we move from a situation where in the 1994 like 30 years ago, a terrorist organization, even in the eyes of the Israeli intelligence, to becoming mainstream and in the government. And this is why we are where we are. Like, what happened? This is a question that I will throw out there, and I don't have an answer because I don't belong to an Israeli society, so I don't really understand what went on. But me observing what was happening, this is one um, manifestation of how what was an Aquarian Uranian community trying to oppose the consensus and the establishment now is becoming mainstream. The archetype of the Aquarius is now becoming actually a very Capricorn archetype in nowadays, which I find, as I said, like it poses a lot of questions as well. A similar incident that I hope establishes also my idea that the idea of fragmentation in identity is really a source of where we are and a reason of where we are. And these groups that hold religious extreme ideologies now are becoming more and more relevant. So, for example, we have in 1995, we have the assassination of Prime Minister Rabin. He signed the Oslo Accords. And we have the shooter here in court saying very clearly that the reason why he did this is because um, um, he, like Ishaq Rabin, had given up a piece of land that wasn't his. This land, which is the West Bank, this piece of land was given to the Jewish people by God, and so it wasn't his to give away. And so in the mentality of the settler, the shooter as well, in his mentality, he stands for an ideal, a religious ideal, a sacrificial idea, where he's sacrificing himself for this religious belief of the land belonging to us. And the chart also expresses this very beautifully. We have this Uranus-Neptune conjunction in Capricorn. Now we're having the marginalized groups into the realm of the consensus, right? They've barged into our vision. Now we see them. They demand to be seen. They oppose the process that the people were moving on, the peace process. And it's squaring the nose. It's like we're now people in both societies were oscillating between, do we move forward? Like, what do we do? Is the peace process good or is the peace process bad? Right? Like we're moving back and forth between what's happening, what's going on. This is just over here. I'm just trying to sort of recapture what I said, and the slide is to help visually imagine the chart, the geography. Because what we have people both in this blue area, which is Israel. We have also a division. We have also a fracturing of identity. So in both societies, we have constituents who oppose the consensus, who oppose the authority, and they are refusing to give up a piece of land, which is the West Bank, which is the red piece, for peace. And the reason that they oppose that is based off religious ideology. Similarly, in the West Bank, so similarly in the Palestinian society, in this red area, and also in Gaza Strip, we have the Hamas people, the Muslim Brotherhood, the offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, refusing to acknowledge the blue area, Israel, to give it away, to give it up. I really don't want to I want to be honest, and they do openly say that they want to take back the land, to take back the land that they've lost for Israel. So we have these two constituents are really from my observation, this fragmentation in both societies is a major problem for achieving any resolution, any way that we need, like, obviously we need to share, right? We have two people that need to share this piece of land. But we have people on both sides refusing, and not just refusing, but they're expressing themselves, the Aquarian and the Uranian, they're expressing themselves as an authority, alternative authority. The last thing I want to say on over here and on like using this slide is the issue of Jerusalem is basic for them, both constituents. This idea of Jerusalem being the city that uh, cannot be given up. Like the Israelis, they have to have it, and the Muslim Brotherhood, the Muslims, the Islamic Islam also needs to have it, but also Palestinians, generally speaking, they want to have like the general national or the people, the normal people are people who would say, okay, we want to have representation there. We want to be able to reach it. But if you have a more religious theology in then they would say that we need to have control over it. And and the idea of the Aqsa Mosque, the compound and the Temple Mount, this is a very contentious issue within these two constituents, really. Um, so not another reason I think this is, I'm going to just like gloss over this very quickly. Another reason why we are where we are, to answer the question of the presentation as what happened, is that also we have sometimes figures who have dominated the scene. So after the assassination of Rabin, immediately a year after, we have the prime minister, like we have Netanyahu elected as prime minister, but he has dominated the Israeli politics ever since 1993, and even before that, you can argue. So he has been elected 3 times as a prime minister. So I think he holds some of the secrets of why we are where we are, I think. And I just want to move on from here. And would you like to would you like me to, would you like me to leave space for questions? Because was like we're moving into sort of the final phases of where my discussion, or shall I just go on?
Wow. I don't have any questions right now. How about you, Robin?
Um, no, you can go on. The only questions I would have would just be a little more clarification about how Hamas became as much of a terrorist organization as they have.
Uh, well, the PLO was considered terrorist right before. So the PLO, any Palestinian leadership before the Oslo Agreement was considered a terrorist organization. So basically, the only reason why it was considered, or a deal was struck with it, was because it renounced violence and it recognized the state of Israel, the right of the state of Israel to exist. So they removed the definition of terrorist from the PLO, and this is why they have come back as the Palestinian Authority. And we have Yasser Arafat, who was terrorist before, now becoming the president of the Palestinian people in 93 and until 2002. He was our president. So if Hamas was to renounce violence and to get into a truce or a peace deal, it would stop being described as terrorist. So if you fight using weapons, Israel, automatically you will be described this way. Another point, I don't know if this helps you or this explains it. In the Arab world, we're talking about 20 countries, and the Muslim world, So we're having billions of people. So if you imagine the Muslim world and the Arab world, so the southern part of the globe, Palestinians are not terrorists. Hamas is not terrorist. So I don't know if that idea is shocking or not, but this is reality. So the idea of terrorism being slammed onto Hamas is mainly a Western idea in response to Israel wanting have that. I mean, I have to be honest. I mean, personally, I've opposed the use of violence all throughout the conflict. Like, I'm for the nonviolent way of trying to assert our political entity, like to demand a political representation. But as I said, sometimes you have marginal groups choosing other ways, and these groups, when they use weapons or armed resistance, I mean, what's called resistance in the Muslim world and Arab world, in the Western world, they are slammed as terrorism. I know this is not a very familiar point of view, but this is why the narrative in the Western world is somewhat different from the narrative in the southern part of the world. So I hope that like gives an idea of I hope that answers like the question.
So
Yeah.
it kind of all depends on who's in power and who's calling who terrorists in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, really, if you listen to the news in the Arab world, it's very, very different from the perspective in the Western community, especially concerning the Palestinian cause. Very, very different. And I'm not just referring to one news broadcast. I am referring to all of them, all across the Arab world. And so it's something good to notice and remember and to have at the back of our heads that it is an unfortunate reality. I do think that I mean we did see how the Pluto Mars is part of their sort of identity signature on the day that they were established. They did use highly, in my view, highly violent and like against civilians, really. Even that is not called terrorism in the Arab world. I mean, I have to admit that. I have to set that as a statement of reality. I'm not trying um, to defend anything over here, but this is a reality versus what, you know. But personally, I think this is like targeting civilians in a form, for example, of suicide bombing is really, it doesn't serve any cause. No matter what cause you want, it doesn't serve anything. Just generally speaking, there are really much better ways to establish yourself and your identity and your questions, especially within our conflict. Like it doesn't work within this conflict, but unfortunately, like sometimes I belong to the margin. I belong to a very marginal group that I hope one day that marginal group becomes part of the overall consensus where we stop using armed resistance and violence against each other as people. So
Yay.
I'll
I agree. I concur.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for the whole world.
I hope so. Yeah.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so definitely the issue of suicide bombings, as we were talking about, is very controversial and it's very divisive across board. But for the Palestinians, the issue that really undermined the peace was the settlements. So this is just a map of the West Bank. The number of settlements didn't just double, but they tripled, quadrupled. They were mushrooming all over. So the idea of again this division among the constituents, the fractured identity structure, is trying to assert itself in this way. So they're moving against the authority which signed the peace deal, which supposedly meant that we are going to have this small piece of land for us to represent to ourselves sort of politically and to have our own national identity being expressed on this land, right? Like this is the summary of what we're asking for as Palestinians. And yet we have the settlers moving into this piece of land, and a lot of them come from outside this place. A lot of them they come from the United States, from France, from England, really from Australia, even South Africa. So from the pre-colonial entities, really, a lot of them come from there, and they bring with them this ultra-Orthodox sort of ideology, very extreme ideology, and a very racist views against Arabs and against Muslims. So we kind of sense that. And these settlements are surrounding our cities. We see them on our roads. They are surrounding our villages. And like this ideology is imported, and it's some of them, I mean, not all of them. I mean, I don't want to like paint every settler with that, because there has been positive instances where it was one story that I was very really encouraged about, where there was one settlement having extremely good relations with the village next to it. That was a very hopeful story. I think it's worth talking about, but that was like back then in the 90s. So it can exist. It's possible. I've seen it, right? But having a very racist and extreme ideology does not help the vision of us being together and sharing the land and respecting each other as like political entities, or maybe even like identities that exist. So as their numbers increased, as the number of settlers increased, they have become more and more important in the election process. So, for example, for anybody to be elected, they needed to gain the consent of these settlers. Their numbers have increased, so demographically they've become so important, or more than 50%, to the extent that if you want to get into the office to be elected as a prime minister, you need to flirt with them. And this is what Sharon did. I'll talk about the politics and then I'll look at the chart. What happened in the Palestinian society now, moving forward from the Oslo Agreement? What happened is that now, seeing all these settlers taking this land, because I mean, over here, these settlements are established on Palestinian land. This land much of it is confiscated. It's just taken away. And maybe I need to add that there's a lot of financial or economic benefits to coming and living in a settlement in the West Bank, because these houses are subsidized, these lands are taken for free. So there is also that element to that. But as we're seeing our land being taken away from it, now the peace process is meaningless. The Neptune archetype, right? In the chart now, we having the conjunction is over in this the conjunction is now over, but the archetype is still very much an Aquarian archetype. So now the illusion of peace is being unveiled. The reality is clearer now that the conjunction is over. Like, we don't have freedom. Now, that's the reality for now. And for Israelis, the peace process meant that they weren't safe as well. There were suicide bombings still taking place. There was still violence taking place. What is called resistance in some other parts of the world. So what happened is that in the Palestinian society, the Palestinian society was beginning to demand re-elections. We wanted new elections. We wanted to elect a new president. There was a lot of corruption as well, because a lot of money was flooding from the Western countries to support this new entity, the PA, that was birthed out of this peace process. But a lot of that money was misused. So we were very angry. And I remember that in our cities, we were meeting in halls, we were calling for demonstrations against the Palestinian Authority because we wanted a change in the Palestinian leadership. We wanted to elect a new president. We wanted to have accountability for this leadership and some of its failures. So the Palestinian Authority was in crisis. The peace process was not moving forward as a result of the suicide bombings. They were arresting Hamas members. There was anger on the street. There was corruption. So generally, people were very fed up with this authority, the PA. In Israel, there was an increase in this the Orthodox and the, well, I mean, not the Orthodox, but like the extreme ideology was the number of people who believed in a certain extreme ideology was increasing somehow. And so there was a need for them in order to be voted into office. So that now they were they were a force needed to be elected. So they were anyway. So Sharon enters the Aqsa Mosque or the compound. What for these Orthodox or the ultra-Orthodox Jews is the Temple Mount. So he was telling them that I hear you. Now I'm entering this, and this he was the first leader to sort of enter this compound and like to assert his authority as a Jewish authority inside this compound. And so they elected him. He was elected into office, and the day that he entered was the day that the Second Intifada was ignited. However, the Second Intifada was very violent, really did not have this natural organic feel to it. It felt very fabricated uh, because now even the demonstrations, they needed to make it on a Friday afternoon in order to make more people go into these demonstrations. Like it wasn't natural. So that was the Second Intifada. And I highlighted here the trine between the Neptune and the Saturn because we like here the event, the historical event is in a way defying our understanding of a trine being a positive phase. I mean, many astrologers do say that, but this is a reassurance of, well, yeah, trines are not always represented by positive incidents in our lives. So I thought I highlighted this in the chart, sort of. Now we have an like from the year 2000 for 2 years we have the Second Intifada, and it was hell broken loose, really. Remember, if you remember the chart where, if you allow me to go back to that very quickly, I'll move also quickly to that. If you remember in this slide, where is it? In this slide, notice how the number of suicide bombings increased with, as the Intifada was ignited, 2001, 2002, 2003. Look at 2002. This is the year of the invasion. Look how many suicide bombings, 55 with a lot of deaths. And what happened with this incident, which is like in September 2000, is that now the PA was in crisis. And so it seems they needed to do something. And Hamas members were released from prison at that moment. And also those parties that were within the PLO who opposed the East, some of them opposed the Oslo Accords, but they maintained within the consensus. So sometimes the Capricorn archetype is not so bad because it provides safety and security because they were within the framework, within the structure of, an organization. And so even though some of these parties opposed the Oslo Accord, but they wanted to keep within the authorities. They wanted to move ahead with it, even though they spoken against it, but they did not act against it. Only in the Second Intifada did they take part of it. So not only Hamas, not only the other Muslim Brotherhood movement, but also the other parties were part of that hell breaking loose for 2 years. The trine in this chart expresses the opportunity that was offered in 2002. So over here in this chart, we have similarly, this chart is very similar in a way to this chart. Whereas here we have a very negative manifestation of the trine. In this chart, sorry, in this chart over here, we're having a very good opportunity. So in this summit, we have all of the Arab world, like 20 countries, offering an opportunity for peace, saying, like, we hear you, we get you. Let's salvage this. And they offer the peace deal, dismantle the settlements inside the West Bank, and we sign a peace deal with Israel, all of us recognizing Israel, and let's have a peace. Unfortunately, that did not take place because the idea of dismantling settlements from the perspective of the extreme right-wing settlers, the biblical settlers in the West Bank, was unthinkable. That they couldn't have been for that peace deal. And their numbers were slowly increasing to the extent that they wouldn't have been able to apply. It's a crime for them. Remember why Rabin was murdered, for example, because it's like unthinkable to give away a piece of land for peace, part of the land for peace. And so this is the chart of the day that the incursion or the invasion into the West Bank cities. Remember, we have the Israeli army pulling out of our cities, and for the first time in my life, I'm experiencing my city without soldiers. This is the day where this was revoked. And that's it. On the ground, what that really meant is the end of the Oslo Accord. What remains is just the PA, as like the PA is just an entity that's there, really. Like, it has no legitimacy, really. It's just an entity that's there. The Pluto South Node is part of this chart, right? It's like the past is coming to make a visit. You know, we're back into where we are. And the trine here, this is another example, historically speaking, where the trine is not really a positive phase, but we also have a square from Uranus to Saturn in Gemini, right? So I think this is another important development where when Prime Minister Sharon was elected by these extreme settlers, he really flirted with them to get into the office, but then at some point he decided to dismantle the settlements in Gaza Strip. So here we're entering the realm of the opposition. We're not there yet, the opposition between Neptune and Saturn. So we're not there yet. We're getting into this opposition, and we'll see the chart, or when did the exact opposition take place between Neptune and Saturn. And so these settlers were very angry, and this is when the siege was imposed around Gaza. It wasn't as strict as it is today, you know, that there was more and more measures taken to tighten the siege when Netanyahu was in power later on. But like this was an important development. And here there's an echo of that in today's world, where we have these same settlers wanting to go back and resettle in Gaza, right? We have an echo to that. As for the opposition, I mean, we're not there into the opposition realm, but really this Saturn in Leo over here, this authority that wants validation and recognition, is being opposed by Neptune, really was disillusioned. And I'm thinking of the settlers that they wanted they wanted this validation. They wanted to assert their authority in the political scene, and they were met by the dismantle of their settlements in this as an expression of this Neptune-Saturn opposition. Well, nearly an opposition, right? Um, but also, yeah, this Neptune realm is there's a disillusionment, right? Like there's disillusionment now in everything that is related to the peace process. There's disillusionment in like it's widespread everywhere at this point. We were at the very critical moment. We were in midway. We were halfway, the opposition, the 180 degrees, where now in terms of the conflict and the struggle, we're going to begin to see like the tides are going to turn toward the phase that we are in. We're moving into more and more into the phase over the world that we are in. So it's a breaking point, this opposition, where, I mean, the opposition is a Libra phase where we have these opposite polarities, like head to head to each other. And really, there's an imbalance there, an expression of imbalance. Also, the elections. Now we get to vote after so many years. Now the Palestinians get to vote. So similarly, I mean, the opposition is not just happening in the Israeli society, but the same kind of expression is also happening within the Palestinian society, right? We still are not there. Like the first exact opposition is very along the corner, around the corner, and we'll get there. We're going to see what happened. But how Hamas wins. And Hamas by then is a terrorist organization, right? It's well, because of the suicide bombing, it's a terrorist organization. Because of that, so since the 90s, since it has started to exert, like to do these attacks, it was declared a terrorist organization. And after 9/11 as well, there was an emphasis on it as a terrorist organization as well. So now all of a sudden, the international community is in a crisis mode. The opposition is like, what do we, it's like there's an extreme polarity over here where we're having a very like precarious situation. What do we do when democracy leads a non-democratic and a terrorist entity, at least from a Western perspective, into government? Like, what do they do? What happens? And so what happens is that the international community was sending money to the PA. They stopped sending money, so we were under a financial crisis. The teachers, the employees were not paid. There was a no projects were moving ahead, no businesses coming over here, and the businesses were forbidden to make any transactional movements. So this was a financial crisis for the Palestinians. And a lot of the people elected were arrested. So the legislative council was arrested by Israel. All of the democratic institutions were crippled. Up until now, they're closed. They're not working anymore. So it was a mess, really. And so this is a situation where we can see, well, I mean, the chart is also has a lot of, we have the Pluto squaring the nodes, this T square, the Uranus, the Mars squaring Uranus as well. So we have this, again, this oscillation between the past and where do we go and how the past has come to sort of knock on our doors. So we before I explain why Hamas was elected, very briefly, this is the chart of the exact opposition. So it was when Hamas took power or control over Gaza, right? So it was under siege, right? It was put under siege, but there was also people from the other national parties, but Hamas made a coup and there was fighting among Palestinians and many of them fled. Many of the other national parties fled Gaza and now Gaza took control of that. But I wonder if Hamas, when taking this move, was actually thinking of a way out of that crisis that we were in as a Palestinian society. It's Like, I wonder if that's what's going on their head. Because now the PA comes and controls the West Bank again. And now money is flowing back into this entity that has recognized Israel, that has revoked violence, right? So we have this division, this opposition, two polar opposites identities, with Neptune again opposing that Saturn in Leo. It's like you're not going to get the recognition that you've wanted. Like, that's not happening with Neptune opposing Saturn, I think. It's going back to why people voted for Hamas. It was because Hamas, and generally speaking, the Muslim Brotherhood as a movement are a very pragmatic movement. They are in touch with the grassroots and with the impoverished communities. They are very shrewd, like politically speaking. They choose very well when to engage in the political process and when not to engage. So, I mean, the Muslim Brotherhood is a force that that we need as an Arab like countries to be in constant negotiation and talk, with, because they are very forceful grassroots wise. And so they felt the vibes among the people, and they chose this logo or this name, change and reform. So the simple people, the independent voters, remember like what happened in the United States, the independent voters who probably belonged to so Hamas got the 70, the blue part of the circle. They got the 70% of the 74% of the votes, whereas the pink side is the sort of the national party, Fatah, the main party in PA. They got 45%. And so people were fed up with that main political party of the Fatah. There was corruption, the peace process was not working, there was land dispossession, number of settlers have increased, right? There was nothing that's working anymore. And so with having this logo, a lot of the independent voters, meaning people who just simply want to live, voted for that, which, come to think of it, I mean, it's really a statement of how we really need to check what we're voting for, just generally speaking. And it really speaks for me, it speaks for how the polarity works in astrology as well. Because sometimes one archetype holds what negates it within it. Like the opposite polarities are two opposite archetypes that are in opposition, but they exist together at the same time. So using, for example, a democratic process like this, you sometimes use democracy, or the seeds of democracy can elect or bring into to the surface undemocratic forces that reverses democracy itself, right? That revokes democracy. So that, for me, it expresses in a way that, like, this kind of dilemma in life, in the Capricorn as well element, where, or in the zodiac sign, where the polarities are actually a reflection of each other, and sometimes they hold seeds of the same things, right? And sometimes they interact. And we're seeking balance basically between the two polar opposites, right? We're seeking balance between these corrupt and violent. Like there has to be something in the middle, right? So now I'm reaching towards the end of my presentation, because we're really entering the world that we see today, which is a new world now, right? Like, ever since Hamas took over Gaza, that's it. That's the reality, that what we have today. Gaza is under siege. And ever since then, we have several wars waged on Gaza. And this is the chart of the March of Return. I mean, in 2018, and so we're getting into this Pluto Saturn conjunction, ushering in a new world, really, right? Like we usher this new world in 2018. But on this is the date where we have marches, peaceful people marching peacefully to the fences and trying to break through the fences peacefully without using violence. But still, they were shot at and sniped, and nobody paid attention really to the march of return. Return means to return to their villages inside Israel. So we did touch upon that before, but still, it was a peaceful attempt to break the fences, break the siege. But we also enter the realm where now, as a way out of this economic crisis, the siege in Gaza, we have these tunnels. These tunnels that are being dug have been dug because the Gazans were trying to solve the economic crisis out of the siege. So they were dug initially to bring food in and to bring stuff that weren't allowed inside Gaza. But later they developed to be now what are basically an underground second city where weapons are made and rockets are made, and these rockets are flying like they're thrown into Israel. So we enter the world that we are in today by this chart. And this is like the final sort of like the final like slide or slides that I have, like some these are like my final thoughts, because now this is the chart of a very recent um, event that took place, or vote that took place in the Knesset, and that vote was about imposing sovereignty over the Israeli settlements in the West Bank. The vote took place, we are under the sort of influence of this current day conjunction between Neptune and Saturn. It was happened when the Mars South Node conjunction as well was just there. So just to quickly explain what is annexation, because really there's no need to announce the annexation because it's taking place on the ground as we speak. So the vote prepares for annexation, which it might be something that we see next year more and more of, or maybe that will be more in the news. But what you see in front of you is the red dots are the Palestinian cities. Like that's it. These are what was given to us in the Oslo Agreement. We were only given these red cities. The Area C, so the Oslo Accords had like 3 phases, Area B and C. Area C, because we're supposed to have that in the Oslo Accords, but we never had that. Area C, like the green, the light green, is already taken. It's taken by Israel. It's annexed. It's already done. No Palestinians exist in this green area. The gray area is where the villages are. It's where the agricultural land is that we're supposed to grow vegetables and fruits from, and where a little bit of the water exists. That gray area, most of it is getting annexed right now, like as we speak. And how is that being done? Simply by putting outposts by settlers carrying the same ideology that we mentioned earlier. And the outpost looks like this. Just opposite a Palestinian home, just outside their home. So even the land that they go and you can cross this land, or you can play in this land, or you can, it's a very important piece of land for the village, for the villagers. The settlers come and they put chairs, they put containers, they put a flag, and they sit there. Like that's an outpost. And slowly more and more of these containers are put there. And then the army comes. The army is only there to protect the settlers. The army comes, and the army is supposed to protect the settlers. So they widen the area where Palestinians are not allowed to go to because under the pretext of protecting settlers. And that's it, like that. And the land is gone. We can't get there. The settlers are armed. This is what now, what the settlers back then look like now. And this phenomena of the hilltop youth is a phenomena that began in the 90s. We felt them, but now they are acting like a militia. The finance minister was himself a hilltop youth settler. He's a settler himself, and he was part of this group when he was a young man. Many of them are young settlers, some of them from outside, and some of them are born here. They are armed, most of them. Some of them are wearing the military uniform, but they are not registered as serving the army at the moment that they are attacking villages. So this is what it looks like for Palestinian villages. Street to street fighting. They throw Molotov cocktails, burning the cars, sometimes the houses, and sometimes the crops. And so we are in this very like the Neptune-Saturn for us looks like a very remember when we had that in the early 1990, it looks like, or in 98, in 89, it looked very hopeless. So right now for us, it feels very hopeless, where the existence of the Palestinian community, you know, as any entity on this land is all, it looks like, you know, we're getting into a culminating phase because the conjunction is happening in Pisces towards the end. And so at the very end of the zodiac sign, so something is being culminated, ending. So what is that end? What is it about? On the ground, it looks like this, which for me, it's heartbreaking, but it's also it's very painful to watch and see, and it's dangerous as well. I mean, the archetype of Pisces, I mean, the conjunction is going to retrograde back into the Pisces element, right, later in this year. And then we will, I think in January or in February, that we will have this new beginning in Aries. But the Pisces element is an archetype where a lot of healing is supposed to take place. I mean, after the fragmentation, after the Capricorn archetype sort of sometimes splinters off the Aquarian archetype into so many pieces, the Pisces is supposed to unify and heal, right? The unity, the healing process before we go on and into a new adventure, a new process, or a new existence or journey. But unfortunately, I think as we're looking right now, this is not happening. Sometimes the healing does not happen. Sometimes there's a chapter that ends and a chapter that opens. And maybe this is why we have a south node, because sometimes we don't heal fully and we have this south node, the karma coming back and sort of biting us or punching us in the face. And I wish I have a much hopeful note to end on, but like this is what this conjunction looks for us right now. So we have Gaza as also a very unfortunate reality, but also in the West Bank, it's the unseen reality as well. And that's a Neptune archetype where a lot of emphasis is there, deserved, well deserved, because it's a tragedy. But also over here, it's a very like it's an ending. There's an ending that's been written, and I'm afraid that this ending looks like we might not be able to make it, or a lot of people will be forced to leave at some point. And these are just my final notes, kind of a summary where I'm just like highlighting the roots, like why we are trying to answer this, why we are where we are. It's because we have this, the main issue for Palestinians is land dispossession, and I'm sure for the Jewish people is safety and security. But it's also this idea of having a Jewish majority, a political representation as a Jewish majority, which is understandable because if you don't have a political representation, you don't have a say in your future. So what the Israelis and the Jews are asking for, which is to control some of the elements of their future, they're denying the very same thing for another population, the Palestinians. And so I also see that as a Pisces Virgo archetype where there is an element of, well, I'm denying you what I give myself. I give myself political representation, but I'm denying that for another people because they're aligning with a higher ideal. They're aligning themselves with God. Suddenly, it's a godly um, journey. It's a godly expenses. It's a sacrificial existence where we need to do this, right? Because the brain, there's a cognitive dissonance. The brain is telling you that you're getting that, but you're denying the very same thing to others. So there has to be um, a logic behind it. And the logic is that they align themselves with the Piscean realm, with something beyond their existence. And that's the religious element in this conflict and struggle. And I really hope that more healing would be, I really hope that, remember in my presentation where at a few years there was a little bit more hope. So this is where I end off, where I really hope that in a few years I'll be expressing a little bit more hopeful message than this one at this point. And I think I will. I hope it wasn't too long. I mean, it was I hope I didn't overwhelm you with the information, and I hope there was enough balance between the astrology and the politics. I hope, I don't know.
It was wonderful. I mean, yes, a lot of information. And speaking just as myself, I am going to have to go back and watch it again because there was so much information, but it really presented, you know, what you were talking about the fractured identity and how the just how I don't know. We were talking a little bit beforehand about, the Pisces part of it being about religion and my God being, the being the only one. And
Yeah, the ideology.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, yeah, it
yeah,
is. This, I think the religion, the religious element, the idea or the theme of religion in this conflict is now on the table. It's like there's the true motivations are on the table right now. If there's a silver lining, so maybe that this is it. The true motivations of these extreme ideologies in both societies, right? The extreme biblical settlers, like the hilltop youth and the Hamas, they're on the table now. They know that they have these true motivations, which was hidden in the Oslo Agreement, right? Remember the Jupiter and Libra. It's like the tension was um, was implemented, but it wasn't clear. And also this idea of religion is also on the table very, very strongly. So now we're seeing the truth of this conflict, which can be a good thing to finally uncover the masks, to unmask the reality and to face it head on. Maybe this is where the true conversations rely, or maybe true conversations can take place where there's no more masking. Everything is on the table. And maybe we can have really solid conversations about how to move ahead with this. And I'm hoping that this is the Neptune in a few years. This is the silver lining of what's going on. If we survive the
Right.
annexation plan, and if we survive, because there's a final invade operation like announced just yesterday into Gaza. So if we survive these, so hopefully we do. Like inshallah, we do, as we say,
yeah.
we'll survive these.
And we
Seems so
also
it's come
we do
seems so
have
it's come down to
Saturn and Neptune going back into Pisces for
for a little bit,
for a little
Yeah,
bit.
but when it
yeah.
finally moves out, maybe we'll start to see some resolve.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
along with that, we have the lineup of Uranus and Pluto, in that beautiful, well,
textile.
again, it's a trine and a sextile,
It's
so it
true.
can be ease, but it can,
Hopefully, yeah, the sextile will hopefully make that trine more positive
Yeah,
in its
yeah.
manifestation.
One thing I say when I talk about our situation, because sometimes it can seem very pessimistic, but I say that the astrology tells us that maybe there will be a divine intervention, like the sextile or the trine, or maybe there will be some sort of a Uranian fallout, the sextile to Uranus. So maybe we can survive this as both societies, of course. I mean, the Israeli society will definitely survive this, but I'm talking about the Palestinian society. I hope it's more than that. I hope it's effort and that we work towards it as societies. But still, at the moment, we're just being hit so hard that like we're there's a lot of like fogginess and we don't know where we're heading. Like it's very mysterious. Our future seems very mysterious at the moment. Yeah.
And it is a reflection of what's going on
Yeah.
in a lot of other places at
In other,
everywhere,
the
right?
yes,
same
Yeah.
time.
well,
I kept seeing parallels to,
Yes.
to what's going on in the US and, over history. I mean, each, you know, different time frame, I was
Yeah.
thinking about what was going on here and it was eye-opening, the parallels.
I was also
yeah,
seeing some parallels to when our country was first started and, how we, you know, obliterated the Indians, the
Mhm.
American Indians, and took over and impressed our ideology on them and made them, you know, not, not be able to embrace their own cultures anymore.
Right. Just kicked them
And we
out.
see it happening now too, where our government is trying to take away a lot of our, you know, pockets of cultural identity in the United States,
Right.
not true.
trying to
Yes, yes,
unify it to an ideal of one
yeah.
ruling
Yeah,
ideology.
and there's like the natural phenomena, which is the natural zodiac, is there will be a pushback, like definitely.
Yes.
That's the Uranian element. The fracturing is very bad. I hope that doesn't happen but
Right.
if it does, it is what it is. Like it's meant to be,
Yeah.
right? Right? Because this is the natural evolution of life and reality, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uranus is always there.
Yes.
And and it rules Pluto and Aquarius too. So, we've got the humanitarian part of it too that is,
Yes.
is becoming more evident.
It's true. I think so. I think never ever before did the Palestinians had as much sympathy and understanding, I think, in any time in our history. And that's very Neptunian, come to think of it, because when we existed on this land, we weren't seen. And now that we're seen, our existence it's very sort of Neptune that exists out there without really existing, right? But I hope this is a positive thing and that something good will come out of it. The fact that we're being understood a little bit more and more. And I like what needs to happen is that the Israeli society needs to understand it more. Like that's what I feel is very, very important to happen.
Yeah.
Like I really wish there would be more sympathy and empathy in the Israeli society.
Yeah.
I hope so.
I think it's
Yeah.
correct.
Do you think there isn't?
I think my observation is that there might be, but it's not said out loud.
Right.
Because similarly, in the Palestinian society, we feel that October 7 should not have happened. And a lot of people are thinking it, but they are not saying it out loud because we're still hitting it, like we're getting beaten, like the sticks are really beating us hard. We're under the sticks. And so that's not the time to sort of uh, ask for accountability. And it's the time to show solidarity. But I think many are whispering this amongst us that this should have never happened. People are disengaging or the sympathy with, I think. See, I myself, I hesitate to say this because I feel that yes, the Hamas have done a very great thing, but I know that the hardcore Hamas are maybe to blame. But a lot of the people are just innocent people who have
Right.
just caught up there. Maybe they voted for it, in 2007, but you've seen the context of why they voted for that. So, one thing is that in the Arab world, we see a lot of social media that comes out of Gaza. So we see a lot of what comes out of Gaza and the people in Gaza, what they're saying. And I do hear them. I do have in the social media them really saying things against Hamas.
Mm.
Refusing what happened, saying a lot of things against the Muslim Brotherhood. And there are people who are very strongly believe in the message of the Muslim Brotherhood, but they think that, I mean, there's a lot of people who think that October 7 should not have happened, but still a lot to do sympathize, I guess. So it's really like, it really needs to be seen what happens afterwards, but it's whispered, like Hamas is to blame for this, really, for what's going on. So it's there needs to be, there will be there will be transformation in the Palestinian identity for sure after this is over. There
Yeah.
will
Well,
be a recreation, and I hope these old people just like some sort of new leadership will arise to the forefront and just take us into different places because the Palestinian Authority has been also, or the leadership has been taking us from one bad decision to another bad decision. So that's part of our history as well. Yeah.
well, and the hope that I have is that the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is, on the Aries point. It's like a whole new realm of possibility,
Yeah.
and it's not, I don't think it's written what it's going to be. I don't believe in, set everything is set in stone, but I think, we have the potential of creating something.
Yeah.
Well, we will be
Yes. I think,
creating something. It's a matter of whether or not we create something beautiful
yeah.
or something ugly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if I want to mention something just in relation to the previous point that, like I was saying, what I'm hearing from out of Gaza in the social media, I'm hearing a lot of disillusionment in the Muslim Brotherhood concept. I mean, it's called brotherhood, and yet there's a lot of disillusionment. There's a lot of crisis in consciousness, even in God. There's like people in Gaza are just questioning even the existence of God now, to let alone the political Islam of the Muslim Brotherhood. So there's going to be a huge transformation in the Palestinian identity. But what that looks like, I don't know. And not just the Palestinian identity, because when we say Muslim Brotherhood, we say across the Arab world, across the Muslim world. The earthquake of Gaza will reverberate across the Arab world and the Muslim world. The transformation will be that deep. It's seismic. Because they're all over, what happens to an offshoot of Muslim Brotherhood and the huge betrayal from the Arab world, obviously, that is having huge reverberations all across the region, like all over. What does that look like? I have no idea. I don't know. But like we will see it on the news, right?
Yeah.
But once
Yeah.
this is over.
Yeah. Well, we can all hope.
We hope, yeah. Hope it's a positive transformation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if the Muslim Brotherhood transform their ideology into a more peaceful ideology, that's a huge deal, right? Like that's for the
Yeah, and,
region.
it seems that ideologies like religion always become perverted.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
a theology. Theology tells you what to believe and how to believe and how to explain the verses and which verses to study and which verses. So it's like it's very it tells you what to believe. And
It
so
seems to
it's,
always be about controlling
yeah,
everyone else to,
into
to
consensus.
be, yeah, to being,
Indoctrination.
yeah, in consensus. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
How true. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you, Deanna.
Thank you
Yes.
for, or thank you for, I mean, whoever is staying as long as this, thank you for listening. I
Um,
really appreciate the opportunity of me having and presenting this to whoever is available to listen to it. So I'm really thankful for this opportunity.
yeah,
Thank
I'm
you.
very
Your
thankful.
perspective is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very thankful for you expressing it.
Thank you.
Thank you.